Union Berlin had never played in the Bundesliga in their 117-year history until 2019, after 10 consecutive seasons in the Bundesliga 2, or the second Bundesliga. After back-to-back qualifications in the Conference League, Europa League, and then qualifying for the Champions League last season, Union Berlin find themselves bottom of the Bundesliga. They are winless in 14 on their worst run of results in their history, and now are almost out of the Champions League. They have to beat Braga and Real Madrid just to stand any chance of progressing. Union won their first 2 games of this Bundesliga season, but have not picked up a point in the league since August. So what is going wrong at Union Berlin? First, we need to know what made them so good in the first place. This is Union's 6th season under manager Urs Fischer, who got them promoted from the second Bundesliga in his first season at the club. Union, under Urs Fischer, looked to play transitional football, typically in a 3-5-2 or a 3-4-3, using those wing-backs and the high forwards to play direct and to play through the lines as quickly as possible. And that's shown in the fact that last season they finished with the 3rd best expected goals allowed, which sounds a bit like girls allowed, but it's not, and conceded the joint least goals alongside Bayern with 38. So expected goals allowed is how many expected goals against a team there is, so that shows how Union had a really good defence last season, and it's a really good sign of that defensively strong football that propelled them to their highest ever finish. However, they did only score 51 goals last season, which was the 9th most in the league, which again highlights their slight reliance and slight kind of need to have defensive strength in order to build and win games. And Union aren't a massively creative team. They do really rely on being defensively solid and then taking the chances when they come. They had the 2nd lowest XG last season, which is 37.9. So they had quite a big overperformance considering they scored 51 goals last season. And those expected goals were below both relegated teams Schalke and Hertha. So it does show how they do sometimes struggle to create those chances. But Union last season did show that in the Bundesliga, being defensively solid can win you games and can get you high up in the league. So what's going wrong this year? So Union are currently 18th, which is rock bottom of the Bundesliga. They've lost 9 out of 11 games that they've played and not got a point since August. When we look at the expected points for Union Berlin this season, it's 14th, around 14th according to Understat, which does show some bad luck, but still shows that they are underperforming versus what was expected of them over their performances that we've seen in the last few seasons. And some of the stats that really highlight how bad Union have been this season are shown in the fact that they've conceded the 2nd most goals against, 26 from an XGA, which is expected goals allowed, as we spoke about earlier, of 16.5, which raises questions of the goalkeeper and the defence, which we'll look at a little bit later on. They also have the 2nd lowest XG and the 2nd lowest goals for. So when you pair that with the fact that they're really struggling to defend and they're conceding a lot of chances, it's a real cause for concern, considering the fact of what we mentioned earlier, how Urs Fischer builds off that defensive solidity to really, get points in the Bundesliga. It's really quite worrying for Union at the moment. So when we consider how Union Berlin play, they're typically set up in a 3-5-2 or a 3-4-3. This is the kind of setup that they had against Bayer Leverkusen in their most recent game that they lost 4-0. In possession, they're typically a 3-5-2, but can also be in this 3-4-3. And that when in possession, it sometimes means that one of the 2 centre mids will drop in to help out and build up. And that allows the wing-backs to push on a little bit higher. One of the centre-backs will move into a slight sort of similar line with that midfielder that's dropped. And it allows Union Berlin to kind of create this 6, this kind of a 3-1-6 that they like to create sometimes when they have the balls. This midfielder will drop a little bit deeper, and it allows the long balls to be played into the wing-backs in these areas and across over to the right-hand side or into the centre-forward. And it means that they can progress up the pitch as quickly as possible and get through those lines, because they kind of miss out, apart from the 8 there, that's kind of their deeper midfielder, they tend to miss out the other 2 midfielders when they're playing in that 3-5-2, and it means that they progress the ball up the pitch really quite quickly. And I think the use of those long balls was particularly shown against Frankfurt, where Union Berlin really looked to use their height. They've got the likes of Alex Kral, who used to play for West Ham, who's on loan from Spartak Moscow. They've got Leonardo Bonucci, Kevin Behrens, who's a bit of a Berlin legend, and even David Datro Fofana, who's on loan from Chelsea, all generally quite tall. So they did look to target them with those long balls. But what they really struggled with is the quality of finishing in this side, alongside generally bad luck, and that was really shown in the game against Frankfurt. And in that 3-0 loss at home to Frankfurt, Union were unlucky. They did hit the woodwork quite a few times. They missed some good chances. They created an XG of 1.07, and I think that's partly in the fact that they do lack quality up front generally. David Datro Fofana, as we mentioned, the Chelsea loanee, has around 3 XG so far this season. He's yet to score. He's unlucky, but he's also been kind of wasteful with his chances and kind of looks a very raw talent still. Doesn't really have the players around him to take that pressure off him, as they're kind of really relying on him as the main goal-scoring threat. Geraldo Becker, who was Union Berlin's top goal scorer last season, he scored 11, still yet to score this season. Kevin Volland and Brendan Harrison also yet to score this so far this season, so they really are struggling to really finish those chances, the very limited ones that they do create up front. And when you consider how bad Union Berlin have been at the back this season, it all kind of comes together to really create this picture that we are seeing of why they are at the bottom of the league at the moment. And that's really shown in the second goal that we can see here against Frankfurt in their 3-0 loss, which was match day 10, which was last week as I'm recording. And you can see here, Frankfurt have the ball on the right of their back three here with this is Tuta, the right centre half of Frankfurt. And you can see that Union Berlin are generally set up in their kind of 5-3-2 here. The one concern that you do have when you see this setup is how bunched this midfield three are. And that becomes a concern when we move on to the next slide, when you can see that nobody's really pressing the ball. This is David Fofana here, who arguably should be moving to that area, maybe. But the problem is that you have two of the Union Berlin midfielders pressing into this area. And that leaves this large gap in this space, but also means that the left wing back here has to press on to the right sided winger. And that means that over here you have this 1v1. I believe that's Hugo Larsson, who Frankfurt bought in the summer, and he's up against the left centre-back of Union Berlin, and it's a bit of a mismatch for pace. So Tuta sees that mismatch is happening, and he plays the ball long in behind and kind of completely bypasses the Union Berlin, lack of press, really, because they should be a lot closer to him. But then that also creates that chance that Frankfurt do go on to score from. And Larsson receives the ball on that right-hand side. He's not even touched it to this point. He's about to play the ball across the box. The problem is, when we saw that press that the two Union Berlin midfielders went towards Tuta before he played the ball in behind, is that now the whole midfield's been bypassed and they've been left behind. So you have these two on the edge of the box, so this ball can be pulled back. And that's largely a problem for the right wing back here, because he's concerned about your man on the edge of the box. And that means that he actually sort of leaves Omar Mamouche there, just to Bonucci, and Larsson then pulls that ball across the middle. He plays the ball right across, and Bonucci for some reason goes towards the front post. He takes a little look over his shoulder before this screenshot and decides that he's going to go towards the front post and sort of gamble. Mamouche just continues his run and goes and plays it in the back post, and you can see that the right wing back here is quite a way off him because he's been concerned of that pull back into this area, and it's just generally a lack of sort of pressing structure. You saw those two midfielders go, and you've just got no support on the edge here against a 4-on-4, and Eintracht Frankfurt work it quite well, but you'd imagine that this is something that should have really been snuffed out before. Just one long ball in behind, ball played across the box, and they've scored. It's just all a bit too easy, and that's kind of been a theme throughout the goals that Union Berlin have conceded so far this season. We consider this is the second goal that Frankfurt score in this game, and the fact that Union Berlin haven't scored more than one since they lost 4-2 away at Dortmund 8 matches ago. It kind of puts the game out of reach, and when you're conceding such a bad goal like this, it's not going to be going well when you're not really creating the chances that can kind of offset that poor defending. And here's another example of how bad decision making has really cost Union so far this season. So this is the first goal that they conceded away in their 4-0 loss at Leverkusen. And Victor Boniface has just played a ball down here to try and reach to Florian Wirtz, but he's lost it and it's being intercepted, and ends up being intercepted by Alex Kral, who's the defender here. And you can see Union Berlin's sort of general shape there. You've got the line of 4, and I believe that's the centre back there, and you've got the 4 across here, and then the 1 up front. So that's the kind of the 5-4-1 there. As we move it on, you can see that Kral's got the ball. He's protecting it from Wirtz. Ideally, you'd want him to play that ball quickly. As we said, they want to play vertically. They want to play sort of quickly, vertically up the pitch. That ball into the midfielder ahead of him would be the obvious play, or he can play it back to him, and then that ball can go into sort of that area. But he delays. I'm not sure whether he has the awareness of what's going on around him, but he delays, and then he decides to play that ball, sort of a blind pass to try and get this pass into here. I don't really understand why he does that. I believe it's Kral in this situation. When he's got to this point, he really should just be playing that ball back, and then they can get the ball up and out of danger. But Kral tries to play that pass because intercepted by Wirtz. The ball drops to Grimaldo. They play a 1-2, and Grimaldo scores probably one of the best goals of the season. But it still shows how, admittedly, you can't really facilitate for Grimaldo scoring a really nice goal from the edge of the box. But if you're going to be that poor in possession and make those errors, you're going to be punished by teams of quality like Leverkusen. And then Union go on to concede 2 goals from corners, both in the back post. They conceded the second most goals from corners in the Bundesliga this season, and then create very, very, very few chances in this game. They concede over 3xg and create 0.03 from 2 shots on target. Had absolutely no chance, had absolutely no threat in this game, and it is really worrying to see. Admittedly, Leverkusen are a really good team, but to create nothing in a game when you barely score goals anyway is going to be a real concern. And when we say Union Berlin aren't creating chances, they also aren't scoring goals. They've scored the 4th fewest in the league so far this season. Kevin Behrens and Robin Gosens are currently their top scorers, and they both started on the bench in this game against Leverkusen. Behrens scored 3 out of his 4 in the first match week against Mainz in a hat-trick, and then scored 1 against Darmstadt and not scored since. Gosens is a left wing-back. He scored 2 against Darmstadt, which was also the second game of the season, and then a couple spread over a number of losses. But Union Berlin then again haven't scored in the league since the 7th of October, and if you're not going to create chances like they didn't in this game against Leverkusen, you can see why that's happening. And when we look at Union Berlin's transfer activity in the summer, it's not really gone very well. You know, they brought in Bonucci in the summer. So far hasn't really worked, apart from he had like quite a good game against Napoli in the Champions League. He went off injured in the game against Leverkusen. They've struggled with injuries to the likes of Robin Knoche, who is their main centre-back and only really come back now. And they played 21 players have started a game so far this season. So they've not really got that consistency, that sort of familiarity within the squad. And when you're making mistakes, not creating chances and not playing particularly well at the back, it really does not help the fact that Union Berlin have the statistically worst goalkeeper in the Bundesliga in Frederic Renaud, who has a post-shot XG of minus 4.8. So post-shot XG kind of calculates whether a goalkeeper should save it or not. And that means that he's conceded nearly 5 more goals than he statistically should have done. And when you compare that to Gregor Kobel, who's Dortmund's goalie and is the best performing goalkeeper in the league, he's saved on average 3 more goals than he should have done. So when you compare that sort of difference, that's an 8-goal swing. That is massive when you consider, the fact that Union Berlin aren't creating many chances to score. When you're conceding 5 more than you should have done, it's really not going to bode well. But to take a kind of step back and to sort of look at the budgetary, restraints that Union Berlin have, they have been overperforming their budget. They have the 9th largest budget in the Bundesliga according to Capology, which is around about 35 million euros per year. And when you compare that to the teams that they were competing for the Champions League for last season, Bayern have a 255 million euro budget, Dortmund 126, Leverkusen even have a 62 million euro budget, and they finished 12 points above Leverkusen last season. So it really highlights how well they've managed to achieve on such a limited budget in comparison to people that they're rivaling. But when you consider how poor their recruitment was in the summer and the fact that their team doesn't really have the quality that you'd expect of a Champions League squad, you can see why they are starting to struggle a little bit. And when we go through their summer recruitment, we mentioned that Bonucci came in. They spent 13 million euros on Robin Gosens, who's not even regularly starting for the squad. Bonucci was obviously on a free. Kevin Volland came in from Monaco for 4 million euros. He's not regularly starting. Brennan Aronson on loan from Leeds has more red cards and goal contributions. David Datra Fofana came on loan from Chelsea. We said he's quite raw. He's doing okay, but still is yet to score for the team. And former West Ham player Alex Král on loan from Spartak Moscow, again, isn't really a high-quality player that can really be playing in the Champions League and sort of challenging for the top half of the Bundesliga. And when you associate the quality of that squad with the difficulty of having a third year of European football, with a higher quality of European football, they aren't matching it with the players that they brought in, and you can see why they have struggled in their Champions League group as a result. But can it get any better for Union Berlin? Well, we look at the next 5 fixtures. They've got Augsburg at home, and then they're away at Braga in the Champions League, and they come back to an away game at Bayern, a home game at Gladbach, and then they're at home to Real Madrid in their final Champions League game. And that's quite a difficult run of games. Augsburg are 10th in the league at the moment. You'd expect that they really do have to show some kind of performance or get something out of that game, because to lose 10 consecutive games in this league would be quite damning for Urs Fischer. I think it would take quite a lot, considering he got them promoted and got them back-to-back European qualification. But there's only so long you can go losing, consecutive matches, and to get to 10 would be quite a statement and really not great for Union Berlin. But if they can get some points and start to turn it around a little bit, we might be able to see a slight change in fortune. But on another negative note, there also have been rumours that Geraldo Becker, who I mentioned was their top goal scorer last season, his contract runs out in the summer and he might be leaving in January. So that just presents another challenge that Union will have to deal with to replace him and to replace the goals. And the chances that he creates will be quite difficult, considering that they don't have the necessary budgetary requirements, that they spent quite a lot of money in the summer. be quite interesting to see whether they can actually replace him or not. But what are the positives? What can we take that are positive from this? Well, considering expected points and expected goal difference puts them above the relegation zone at the moment, there can be some sort of belief that Union Berlin can get themselves out of this situation, some kind of optimism that they can start to take their chances, and they do have the quality in their squad, and they've spent 13 million euros on Robin Gosens, for example, that they have the quality to stay above teams like Heidenheim and Darmstadt, even though they lost to Heidenheim in September, admittedly. But if they can find their form, then I expect that we will see them start to move a little bit up towards the sort of middle of the table. But I think it'll need a proper summer revamp in this squad to see them get anywhere near to European football that we've seen over the last few seasons. And that's shown in the fact that they really, really need a goal scorer. They've never really replaced Taiwo Awoniyi, who they lost 2 seasons ago now to Forest. He was their top scorer at the time. Sherrod Becker did a good job last season, but he's also going to leave. So they really need to find goals from somewhere and find a bit more creativity, because their squad really currently lacks quality in both departments. With them likely getting knocked out of Champions League football, I think with fewer games, more focus on the team, hopefully playing a more consistent lineup, we can start to see Union Berlin build at least a streak, a little bit of a patch of form, and hopefully climb up the table, because nobody wants to see them going back down to the second Bundesliga. I can't really see it happening. I hope it doesn't happen, but I think there's some signs there that they do have, some talent like David Fofana, Sherrod Becker for however long he remains, that they can get back into at least mid-table in the Bundesliga. Let me know if you think Union can turn this around. It's quite interesting to see how they have sort of fallen off their perch after the last few years. But I'd really like to see them get back to at least some sort of level and stay in the Bundesliga this season. So let me know what you think in the comments. Can Union Berlin turn this around? Leave me a like if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you'd like to. And I hope to see you in another video very soon. See you later.